In this video, I would like to return back to our coverage of the abstract factory design pattern, which we started in our previous section. But we had to postpone it in favor of going over the details of the UML sequence diagram. However, let's go back and finish our talk about this design pattern. So of course, abstract factory design pattern is part of the creational patterns, and our handout for the design patterns is right here in this section. So in summary, this was our class diagram. And basically the idea behind this class diagram is to implement the abstract factory design pattern, and it's based on the fact that we try to simulate arrival of visitors in a building, and we need a variety of different types of visitors so that we can implement different behavior for different types of visitors. So part of the solution for this abstract pattern that we create uniform base class, which is the common part to all of kinds of visitors. And the simulation scenario, which is actually creating, needs to create rather these visitors and wants to communicate with them, is retaining a list of visitors, but it does not retain a list of specific type of visitors. It only retains a list of references to this superclass or base class for all types of visitors. So this is a very common approach to manage variety of different kinds of objects that have something in common. So we can keep track of them like in this list, but store only references to the common part of them. In addition to this, because there is this challenge that we only want to have this very generic list, at the same time creation of individual types of these visitors needs to be solved. And for this, we designed the interface that we can name iFactory visitor. I prefer to name my interfaces with a capital I in front of their names. So here we have create visitor type of method operation, which is abstract, of course, inside the interface. There's no implementation at this level. However, there are concrete factories, and these are normal classes that are capable of generating specific visitors. So, in addition to this, we constructed a sequence diagram, and I've made a few updates in this diagram that I'd like to share with you. So this is the new script. Now that we're more familiar with the details of the script of this sequence diagramming tool, we can go a little bit over the new features in the script. And what was still missing in the previous version of this diagram, that there was no showing constructor of the visitor, like visitor shopper or visitor emergency, based on what we have in our class diagram out there, which of course is happening inside the factory, concrete factories create visitor operations. Okay, so each type of factory, emergency visitor factory or this shopper visitor factory, is capable of creating the corresponding visitors, and here we create visitor shopper, and here we create visitor emergency. So I added this to the script of our diagram, and I'll take a walk through this diagram in a minute. But this is now the complete picture, and so I just copied and pasted the script into the script portion of this diagram. And so now we have this new version of this diagram, updated version of it. So I'll just use an export function to export this diagram into my subfolder right here, and just export it as a PNG image. And so once exported, I can open it in my subfolder here, and we can zoom in a little bit into this picture. Just want to take a quick basically a quick look at this diagram sequence of all the calls that are happening here. And of course we have the class diagram, and now this is the result of our diagramming. So I assume that the system, it could be an operating system or Java virtual machine environment, is calling the main method in one of our classes. Of course, main method is static, which basically is possible to call without any object instance. So this main method begins to execute, and it holds the rest of this demonstration. So the first thing that happens inside the main method is creation of the new factory visitor shopper. So we decide that we want this specific type of objects to be constructed, so we know there is a corresponding class available in terms of the factory, and we decide to create it as new. By the way, here's the example of the actual main app, main implementation. And so the way it is happening here is that we create this new object just like this, right? So this object gets created here. This is of course the actual constructor syntax with the new operator. This is Java example, but because this is happening inside the parentheses right here, this is the first thing that happens. So this is why it just appears to be right at the top of everything that happens inside main. Right, the next thing happens is that we create simulation scenario, now passing the reference to the factory for visitor types, shopper types, and we create a new simulation scenario with this type of factory. So this gets created. The next we call create visitors into the scenario class. Right, so we created simulation scenario. Now we make a call. So now we have more details right here. Of course, the simulation scenario is using whatever factory was provided. So it happens to be this type of factory. So we call create visitor. And part of this create visitor, of course, we create new visitor shopper, as perhaps is predictable by creating this specific factory. So all the details about creation of this shopper object are hidden within the factory, and that's one of the benefits of the factory design pattern, that here inside our factory class dedicated to the creation of these visitors, it can do some additional steps to configure the parameters of each visitor, to pre-package its agenda, whatever the artificial intelligence features could be configurable for our visitors and their behavior during the simulation. So could be some really nice features implemented part of this object creation. Once we're done, we're complete with creation of the visitor as was requested by the scenario. Again, what I'm not showing in this diagram, that I'm actually using the counter of how many visitors I want. So in reality, the create visitor perhaps makes this call into the visitor shopper factory many times. Here, for instance, like 100 times, which will result in creation of 100 of visitors. So once we're done, we return to our main method right here. So we're just basically done with this part of our main method. And the next step is to change the factory, because the scenario is running here. So it's doing some other things, basically running the simulation, whatever happens between these two things. And suddenly perhaps we want to switch into the emergency mode. So what we do is, again, we create new visitor emergency. So my script for this case is a little bit different. Basically what I do here is that I am actually I was going to change this also to new notation, so this is the place where I missed it. So I'm just going to update my script and this picture. Inside the sequence, I just copy and paste this, and it gets updated with the new notation. And I'll just do my export one more time to the PNG image. So I'll just have to reopen this image one more time. Okay, and so now it just appears to be nicer with using the new. And so here we call new into visitor emergency this time, because it just appears that our scenario decided or part of this running application decided that now we need to create some emergency visitors, basically emergency staff. Okay, so we change the factory and we create visitors right here. Right, so we create visitors, but unlike with the previous version of the factory, the same exact method is now calling into the new factory, of course, which is creating new type of visitor as requested. Right, so this is all showing correct sequence of calls. So this sequence diagram tells us the entire story of what could possibly be happening as part of running this use case scenario, where we're trying to execute the scenario steps pre-configured to use 100 visitors and 5 emergency personnel, and trying to simulate emergency in our building.